What's his name?
Blackie.
You want to go show me Blackie?
Yeah.
Okay.
Go film. Yeah, because that was Hey, Blackie! Blackie! Hey, boy! Hey, boy! Oh, get me out there. Look at out there. It's out over there. Sit! Good boy. There you go, not. You let him take it.
Did it get you all dirty?
Oh, damn it. I'd stop for killing. Blackie! Did you enter the ocean?
I haven't yet.
You didn't?
Not yet.
I found those things at the ocean.
On the beach? Mm-hmm.
My favorite one is this.
Did a beaver shoot it? Do you have beavers close by here?
No. No beavers around here. But I have a book about beavers.
Uh-huh.
They pull off these and make a fire with them.
Uh-huh.
I have some inside the cutting set. Eat those eggs. It's a broken curve.
Ooh. It's a marble, huh? And broken. On the beach, too? There's all sorts of treasures at the beach.
I like this part.
There you go.
We brought back what we could get in the cooler. It's all we could carry, wasn't it? You know how the plane works.
Oh yeah, people are bringing this to
Yeah, I agree. Good.
Yours, Stevie? Whose is it?
It's Steve's.
Is that enough hot dogs or you need more?
I can get some hot dogs on here. Hot dogs on there, they'll put over there. The ones that they like dark people do a fast fry.
Start holding up the party here. I'm getting hungry. I'm gonna make a fool out of myself here. I may just take what you got and just take them home and never mind the rest. I'll hurry up. Faster.
Yeah. What? Turn up the heat a little bit. He's named after his mother.
Boy, I never
Uh-huh.
get much fish this year.
Hey, baby. Hello.
What?
What?
Those hamburgers done, Grandma? Yes. Might want to turn those hot dogs over.
Boat moving that way.
Huh?
Go ahead.
Hi, how you doing?
Huh? It working? Oh, my name's Steve Oomittuk, born and raised in Point Hope. Lived here most of my life. We're on a site called Inupiaq, means ancient ones in our language. They existed about 2,500 years ago to about 4,500 years ago. These, there's about 600 sod houses to this day. Last time it was excavated was 1939 to 1941 by a guy named Rainey Folich and Helga Larson. And they interviewed a lot of the elders back in those days, but as you see, the Inupiaq people were not whale hunters, but they were walrus and seal and caribou, and their houses were totally different than the Tigra houses on the over towards the point. Their houses were above ground. They figured maybe the climate was a little warmer. Maybe it was before the Ice Age. But they were made out of driftwood and sod, and they had wooden planks on the inside. They were about a 10 by 10 square. The women had their own house. There was a lot of lady stuff in one house, and the men had their own houses also because there was all men tools in them. When Rainey and Larson excavated, they mapped out 600 houses, and then they randomly picked 70 and excavated those 70. And what they found was they found a lot of stuff that was finished, unfinished, broken, and raw, like they were working, and then they were gone. They just kind of left the area. They don't know if they occupied the 600 houses at one time, but out of the 70 houses that they excavated, they found so much stuff that was left behind. You know, it was unbelievable. They had a drainage system. I mean, they had a whole community here of different size houses and everything. They noticed they had a drainage system, corrals that where the water would drain down into the lower sections and not, you know, not get the place wet. But these kind of people, the Inupiaq people, there's some sites over at Coos and Stern and over in Daring that they recently found during a water sewer project that they were doing in the village, and they found some old house remains that were identical to the Inupiaq site here because they found some of the artifacts were similar, masks and everything. And oh, these are walrus skulls that were in some of the houses that people had dug up. About 10 years ago, there was quite a few people digging in these areas looking for ivory and tusks, and because you find them all over the place, arrowheads, real nice artwork. Inupiaq is well known for their carvings with the tools they had back then, where, you know, it's very unique, you know, style that they have, very detailed. Flooding from the old site, and you could see Point Hope in the background, the new Point Hope. What's that?
Can you say the start of the sentence again for me? That they moved Point Hope?
Okay. They moved Point Hope in 1976 and 77 because of the flooding out towards the point, and they moved it 2 miles east to get away from all that flooding. Our original name is Tikiaq. Tikiaq is the pointer finger. When you point and you make you make the map of Point Hope. You got the tip of the pointer finger is where Point Hope's at, and then you old ceremonial. It's a gravesite of probably a shaman that was buried hundreds of years ago, or it's a whalebone graveyard of the Poino people. The Poino people buried their people above ground like the Indians on whalebone racks, and their belongings would be below them. Their stuff that was real vital throughout their survival in the Arctic. Their bows, their arrows, their harpoon, their walking stick they'll knock, their knives. They would break them down below and break them and lay them below them, so that when he died, that that the spirit went free with him too, because they were so close throughout their survival. So they.
You can walk just around it, or
Yeah, this is a very old site. Back in the 1920s, the missionaries were there was so many bones laying around everywhere that they wanted to bury them in a way it's always been buried. So they built a fence of a lot of the burials that they tore down. Certain graves were not torn down because the elders then told them not to tear certain graves down because of maybe the powers that they had. Probably were shamans that they didn't want to disturb, that were real strong in their memory, and so they left certain graves alone. This is one of them. There's several over there on the other side, and there's some more, these other bones. The Poino people have been hunting whales for 2,500 years, so as we go through the rest of the sites, you will see our graveyards are whalebone, our feast grounds are whalebone, and our houses were whalebone. So the whale has always been the center of our lives. Our drums when we dance, that tell story of whaling and hunting. The membrane of the liver from the whale is used for our drums. It's still used today. Poino is very traditional in a lot of things they do, how we mark a whale, how we cut up a whale. We still hunt the whale in our skin boats. Point Hope has always been a very traditional place. How we prepare food, how we celebrate the born of the ice. When the ice is born, we pull out the whale's tail from the ice cellars, the food siloks that we have over towards the point, over by the sod houses. Whaling captains still use those to prepare food. You use the whale blubber. You surround the blubber around the tail, and it's a delicacy. It gets fermented from spring till late fall, whenever the ice connects to the shore, the slush ice. It's called the born of the ice, Kinu. When the ice is born, that's when we celebrate the whale's tail, Angirok. And it's a delicacy to the people of Point Hope. We've been doing that for hundreds of years. We've been hunting whales for 2,500 years, and somewhere along the line, they've been doing that, and we still do it today. Well, the Point Hope people have always been here. There's talk, before, the old myths and stories they talked about where then they lived by the mountains when Point Hope was underwater at one time, and how it was brought back from the ocean, and how it came up from. There was a guy called Tulognagrok, who was a trickster. He was made by this old lady with their puya. It was the soot of the seal oil lamp, and some feathers. And she put a raven's beak on his forehead, and awoke the next day and found this little man on on the floor of her house, and she was asking him where he was from, and she named all these villages all over the area. And then she asked him, "Are you my puya?" And he said, "Yeah." And he was this man that had a raven's beak on his forehead, Tulognagarok. That means, Tulogak is the raven, and Tulognagarok is the raven man. So, and he was a trickster. He was a conqueror. He liked to conquer things. There's a lot of stories of Tulognagarok in our culture and history. How he brought daylight. They used to talk about there was only the moonlight when they went hunting. Tulognagarok went out hunting. They talked about the sea monster that lived way out in Negron, that lived out, that nobody could catch. And Tulognagarok, they used to meet in these big houses, kajis, real big house where the men would work on their tools and work, tell stories, work on their boats and stuff like that. And they always talked about this sea monster that they could not see or get. And he told them, I can get it. So he went out on the moonlight and paddled way out, and he could hear it, but he couldn't see it. And so he kept going further out, and he couldn't see it. And there was this song that they used to talk about years ago. Some of the elders said that they had a chance to learn this one song that brought animals back. You could go to any animal's track or their path, and you sing this song, and the animal would come back to you, and they could catch it, come right to you. And Tulognagarok sang this song to bring the Negaron, the sea monster, up so he can see it. Well, it came up right by him, and he harpooned it, and it went down, and it didn't come up for a long time. And so he sang the song, but when it came up as the land. It came up as Tikiak, and Tikiak came out of the water. And that's why we're so way out on the spit, And they used to talk about, on the old site, when I was young, they used to talk about this wound where Tulognagarok harpooned the sea monster, Negaron, and brought it back from the land. Brought it back as land. And but it's eroded away now. It's not in that area anymore. A lot of our land has eroded away. But there's a lot of stories of Point Hope, that deals with all kinds of things. And Tulognagarok is always in there somewhere. Yeah, yeah. Well, he brought daylight. The story of the whale, I never really heard how everything got started then, but I just know we've been hunting the whales for 2,500 years, but I don't remember any stories of Tulognagarok actually catching a whale other than bringing Tikiak out of the water. There's a lot of stories of how we believe the whale gives itself to us. And when we put its head back in the water, it's reborn. There's certain things that they do. A whaling captain's wife, a whaling captain. They used to say long ago that when they're out on the ice, the woman at home, the whaling captain's wife, had to move slowly, because when the whale came up by her husband's boat, or the whaling captain, her boat, if she was moving around fast, the whale would go by fast. But if she's moved slow, that the whale would move slow right in front of her boat, and they would harpoon it. There was other sayings where she couldn't brush her hair, because you would make the muktuk thin. She couldn't cut with her knife or ulu during the spring hunt. Otherwise, if her husband harpooned the whale, the line would break. There was so many things that a whaling captain's wife had to know during the spring hunt, certain rituals and how you had to do things. You had to
part of
prepare.
our
Yeah. And there was always, you know, Point Hope is unique in its own way. You know, we're still the culture, the history. We the way we mark a whale in the water, the different shares, has always been done the same way it's always been done. Like the Born of the Ice, the celebration with the whale's tail, when it's kinu, when the ice is born, it's a delicacy. It's the people get together. It's you know, the blanket toss, the feast, how the ceremonial grounds, the Christmas time, the games, the ceremonial dances that we do where they're not allowed to take any pictures. The masquerade dance, where they go to whaling captains' houses and dress up and dance to their umas and in a way where you just move any which way you want. It's called the Uingarok, and then they do one on the they call Ulaktichi on the first full moon of the new year, where they go to whaling captains' houses and dress up on a full moon of the first of a new year to get for a good season for everybody to get going and let's get ready and do things.
So the elders have this knowledge that they share with
Oh yeah.
and are the young people learning this?
Yeah, we have a few. Yeah, just some people. I go into the schools. I talk the history of Point Hope. I try to let the younger generation, uh, you know, be strong in who you are. You know your culture, know your history, know your grandparents or your parents' songs and dances. Don't let them die with it. With them when they go, some people don't dance them, and they lose those songs because nobody dances as we don't sing them. And a lot of the songs are dying with because some of their families don't dance.
Yeah, it only takes one generation.
Yeah, and it only takes one. It's true, and that's why we always, we go in school and we want the students to know where they come from, know who they are. We're one of the oldest continuous inhabitants on North America. We've been doing this for thousands of years. Don't let this generation lose it. I mean, our ancestors been teaching us these things for hundreds and hundreds of years, thousands of 2,500 years we've been hunting the whale.
You guys are an original people.
Yeah, we're original people that are still here. It wasn't long ago that they moved out of the whalebone sod house. The last lady to live in a whalebone sod house was 1975, and that's not very long ago. You're talking 30 years ago. And when I was a kid, I used to go to her house and make sure she had water and wood, because that was my aunt's place, my uncle's house. And my grandmother would always make sure that I went there to make sure she had water and wood. And we'll go into it there in a little bit. Point Hope's whalebone graveyard. It's made of jawbones. Like I was talking earlier about, these all used to be part of a burial for the Inupiaq people. Racks that were built from time. Some of them were pretty old. You could see how rotten some of them are. And some of them are so old. We've been hunting whales for 2,500 years, so some of them got to be pretty old. And But in the 1920s, the missionaries tore down most of the graves, and then they formed this fence. And then they buried them, that wooden cross, they buried all the bones in that area that they picked up, because they were scattered. The birds, the ravens, the squirrels scattered the bones all over. This whole place was just covered with bones from everything, everywhere. Sled runners, boats, everything. So I was too young to see it, but my grandmother saw it. They talked about it.
The bones that are along the perimeter are the bones that made up the racks.
Yeah, yeah. They made the whalebone racks, and a lot of the it was a lot of the whaling captains that were buried on the rack. And then if you weren't, you were, whether it was brought on a sled and put on top of the ground on a sled, but in the burial site areas, or just in a boat, you know, or but the above ground. The Inupiaq people, the site that we were on over there, they buried their people below ground. But the Tigra people, the Tikiak people, buried their people above ground.
So when was this?
This was built, formed in 1920s, somewhere in the 20s. The missionaries had talked the people into tearing most of them down. Some of them, as you saw, were left alone because the powers they had, whether they were shamans that were buried there and they did not want them disturbed. Some of them were left alone. But then in 1920s, they formed this fence with the remaining of the bones.
And you still use
Yeah, we still use it today. We're running out of room. Some people are being buried outside of it, but I was running out of room. Well, population of Point Up was about 950, and we still have a lot of health issues that we're trying to take care of. A lot of high rate of cancer, stuff like that.
really have
Yeah,
cancer?
yeah, we do have a high rate of cancer, and we have young people dying of cancer.
Is that
You know.
environmental, do you think?
Yeah, you know, we always heard of Project Chariot. You know, the Army was here in the 50s. They did a bunch of tests. They did the iodine 131. They wanted to do an atomic bomb explosion over by Cape Thompson to build a deep water harbor, an instant harbor where, well, they figured, okay, you know, they're going to do this explosion. This is about 1959, 1960. They were going to do this atomic bomb, Edward Teller. They wanted to build a deep water harbor for the Navy to watch the Russian coastline and stuff like that. And they came to Point Hope, and back then there was only about 300 people living here, and they got it all set, but they needed a 25-mile radius of, you know, evacuation. We wouldn't be able to move back to Point Hope.
They were right.
And